This is a read of The River Between Us by Richard Peck, Chapter 3. By the time Noah came in from the pump, we pretty nearly had supper on the table. Cass was good help if you could keep her mind on it. She could cook water, ground meal, and make clabber milk, and bone a mudfish as well as Mamma herself. She knew her herbs too, what they seasoned and what they cured. She knew her blackroot and her golden seal and lady slipper and prickly ash and where to find them. Cass took charge of the chickens too. They lived pent up on the other side of the house. Chickens and me didn't get along. If I had to keep them, I'd as soon not eat them. But Cass had a hand with fowl. She named them too. Every chick of them, before they feathered out, Mama said better not name anything you fixin' to eat, but Cass did. She went right on naming them under her breath. We thought we'd eat pretty good. Noah was right smart to kill game. Squirrel and prairie chickens, and in the fall before wintered up possum, quail, pheasant, ducks. We baked corn dodgers and fried meat in the fireplace, and white beans, gristle, and cornmeal mush got us through the darkest part of winter. Here in April, we were still weeks from anything out of our garden. Oh, you can't picture how we lived back then. There wasn't but a string latch on the door, and we didn't have a stove of any description. We'd never seen one. We kindled fires with flint and steel and cooked over an open flame in the kitchen. We baked in a Dutch oven set onto the bricks beside the hearth. In winter, we lived in this kitchen to keep warm. That's how it was with us. We didn't know any better. Noah hung Pa's fowl piece with the pouch and the shot bag on the chimney. Mama wanted him to sit at the head of the table in Pa's chair. It was to remind Noah that he was all the man this family had. We turned back our sleeves and fell to our supper. Mama has seen Cass's red, swollen, staring eyes. Noah was his silent self. Most times he could make a tree seem talkative. I heard a distant rumble over the river and hoped it was thunder. Long before people began hollering war, Mama was already afraid she'd lose Noah. Most boys hankered to go on the river. They'd hang out around the landing, wants to be taken on as roustabouts. They dreamed their boy dreams of being steersmen, which was apprentice pilots were called. They'd have settled for being strikers, wiping down the metalwork with oily rags. The names of the boats swam in their heads: the Grey Eagle, the Jubilee, the Neptune, the Rowena, the Fashion, the Vesuvius, the Arkansas Star. What a worry this always had been to Mama. A dark cloud gathered over her last Christmas time when South Carolina seceded from the Union. They they'd get the Cairo City Gazette down at the landing, only a day or so late. We weren't backwoodsy people who still didn't know Lincoln was president. The minute Mama heard that the Cotton States were seceding, she feared anew for Noah. Then this month, when little Napoleon Beauregard fired on Fort Sumter in Charlestown Bay, the whole sky darkened. Another week, and Lincoln had proclaimed his blockade of the southern ports. Now he was calling for 75,000 volunteers to fight. Mama couldn't spare Noah. She couldn't forbid him much longer. Him and me would be 16 in the fall. He was a good boy, steadier than Pa, but he was restless for a riderless horse. We ate our meal by the light of the kitchen fire. Mama looked up once, stole a glance at Noah, but he was only a dark, broad shouldered shape against a crackling fire. It was big doings that night, a dance in the room over the Rogers store. This was the first such gathering of the spring. A fiddler was in Cobden and Mr. Chilly Atterbury to do the calling. We wore our other dresses, the linsey ones we tried to save back. Noah wore an old black coat of paws, and he was lost in it. We went, though. Everybody in the district who wasn't tied to the bed or locked in the attic went. Everybody would be there, bar the riffraff who lived around the ruins of a still town of south of town. Mama thought we'd ought to make a showing. She didn't want people talking behind our backs. She didn't want talk against Pa Cass. Mama had her pride, though she said herself that pride couldn't hollow you out. Grand Tower was only a settlement in them days, where somewhere between a landing and a town. They hadn't gotten around to survey of the place. It was mainly strung along a single dirt road we called Front Street. People said that if war came to us, it would either make Grand Tower or break it. Many an old plug wood horse stood at the rail outside Roger's store. Fiddle music whined from the upper windows. Upstairs, we found the room crowded under the yellow tallow light. Mama made for the mourner's bench where the older woman sat out looking on. There were already sets dancing down the room and another square going at the end with the young kids. But Cass stuck close to Mama. Cass wouldn't mix, and there wasn't anything you could do about it. Mama was still young enough to shake a leg, but Pa wasn't there. Old Aunt Madge Bledsoe made room between herself and an aged country woman named Mrs. Howard Yancey. It was whose sister-in-law, Mrs. Champ Hazelrig, was et by her own hogs. Mrs. Yancey was old-fashioned even for them days, and dipped snuff on a stick to rub on her gums. With a quick nod, Ma settled in with Cass beside her. Noah and me hung at the edges, watching the dancing. There was no shame in partnering with your brother, but it took Noah time to set his mind to it. Mr. Chiliadbury was in full spate calling, "Bird in, buzz in, pretty good bird, for the shape she's in." Hands clapped, elbows flapped, and that old sprung floor rolled and heaved. Mr. Chiliadbury could grow topical in his calling. "Buchanan out, give a shout, Lincoln in, show a shin." People whooped at that and fashioned footwork to go with it. But then he went too far, as he was apt to do when he was calling. Jeff Davis is president. Abe Lincoln's a fool. Jeff Davis rides a big bay horse. Abe Lincoln rides a mule. Jeff Davis had just been made the president of this new country, the Southerners, the Seckish. Though they started up and Lincoln was our own Illinois man, the Southerners whooped with approval. Catcalls and heavy stomping came from the rest. Mr. Atterbury grew up just shy of a fist fight and fell back on an old faithful Texas star. Gents to the center and back to the bar, ladies to the center to form a star. Now we were in there with them, me and Noah, backing and forthing and sashaying with the rest. I tried to switch my meager skirts and find my place as the star turned to the tune. And then somehow I was across from that young man named Curry Marshall. Now our elbows linked, so I tried to grow light on my feet. I bit my lips to make them pink and tried to simper. But I expect Curry Marshall was looking straight over my head. He was a big, tall galoot, tall as Noah. I don't know how long we all danced until, like the crack of doom, a steamboat whistle split the air, a bow bounced off the fiddle, and everybody stomped to a sudden stop. Right quick, we heard footsteps pounding up the steps. W.J. Jenkins burst up upon us. "It's a Southern boat. It's the Rob Roy from out of New Orleans." A whoop went up from the Southerners and the Northerners alike. "Where's my boys?" cried J.W. Jenkins. He ran the freight landing and the store that went with it, the only other store we had. There was unloading to be done of whatever was coming off the boat. Noah and Curry Marshall and 3 or 4 others who worked at the freight landing darted forth. Noah brought home the only ready money we had, though Mama thought he worked too close to the river. Everybody ganged downstairs. We met every boat. This was a special case. The clammy night air hit us full in the face as all the town made for the landing. The Rob Roy blazed with lamplight that lit the water around it. The paddle wheel churned in reverse. The gangplank was already down. I'd never set foot on a big boat. To me, a river boat was a palace. The pair of flaring gold chimney stacks belched flame-colored smoke into the night. Below them, the decks glowed like gingerbread wedding cake. The Rob Roy was filled to the gills with passengers. They must have been Yankees hurrying home in case war trapped them, and there were those people who seemed always on the river, restless travelers. The railings were jammed tight with dark figures. I saw the firefly glowing in the gentleman seegers. I imagined I saw diamonds within the ladies' flowing cloaks and emeralds in their hair. I couldn't picture where they'd come from, where they were going. Did I know enough to wonder? We worked our way forward to see Noah and Curry and the other boys running up the gangplank for the freight. We all waved and waved until the pilot up on the Texas deck both waved back. What a sight it all was, this brilliance in the velvet night. People were crazy to hear the news. They called up to the passengers leaning on the rails. What's it like down yonder? What's the conditions in New Orleans? The port's open, someone called back. Business as usual. Still shipping cotton. But we was boarding and searched at Cairo. We drank it all in and turned over every word. Then lo and behold, 2 figures were coming down the plank. Will I ever forget that first sight of them? 2 figures, backlit by the boat, coming down to us by lantern light. A young lady was in the lead, in ballooning crinolines. Heavens, I'd never seen such skirts. Rustling taffeta stretched wide over hoops. Her top part was encased in a cut plush cape with tassels, and her bonnet, my stars. I pushed people aside to get a look at it. A bonnet too dark to make out except for the ice blue satin it was lined with, and a whole corsage of artificial violets planted inside next to her face. An enormous satin bow tied beneath her chin. And then her face framed with long dark curls beside the violets. Her eyes were large and darkly fringed. Her Cupid's bow of a mouth too dark to be as nature intended. She must be from New Orleans. No town between here and there could have produced her. The slant in the gangplank all but upturned her. She clung to the rope with one gloved hand. From the other hung a round hat box covered in elegant wallpaper. She turned back to the young man behind her. I saw this other one only in silhouette at first. He was narrower, darker, shrouded in a long, plain cloak. In place of a bonnet or a traveling hat, his head was tied up in a bandana. It was some of the fine silken materials. The tails of the knot were artfully arranged. Her hands were full of various boxes and reticules. The 2 of them murmured together. Behind them, a deckhand staggered under a humped-back Saratoga trunk. At the end of the plank, he was very nearly stepped through the young lady's hoop. When he swung the trunk off his back, it lit in the mud. By then, I was standing as close to the young lady as I am to you. She turned right to me. "Ah, le sol," she said. Her great fringed eyes grew wider. "Come again," I said in a trance. He's drunk, that one. All men are drunkards. And the men on this boat, all of them spit, spit. She pointed back to the Rob Roy in case I missed seeing it. I stared at her, and all the crowd around us stood silent, listening in. Drunk or sober, the deckhand was back up the plank. Now here he came again with yet another trunk. I'd never known anybody with two trunk loads of anything. But no, wait, it was Noah, bent under this second trunk. He sidestepped the young lady and almost fell off the plank for looking at her. She noticed him, I believe, but now she turned to address us all. Evidently, the world was her stage. I am meant for St. Louis, but I cannot go. It is too dangerous there. She sang out, and in her mouth, the word dangerous took on quite a foreign sound. It was true, there was unrest up there. On the day Lincoln took oath of office, a Confederate flag was rung up over the Berthold Mansion in St. Louis. Confederate flag rose above some of the best houses on Olive Street, according to the word we had. People said the only safeguard to federal authority in Missouri was the St. Louis Arsenal. Soon people said there'd be blood in the streets. I am, how do you say it? The young woman declared, out of the frying pan and into the fire. What must we all have looked like to her, listening open mouthed to her every word? It didn't seem to displease her, and I was insulted at Cairo. She looked around at us with her great fringed eyes to see how we looked, how we took this terrible news. Cairo was the last town at the bottom tip of Illinois, where the north points a long finger at the south. Insulted, she repeated. Me? She dealt her bosom a blow. The Federals, they come on the boat in a swarm like bees. They want to see our papers. They want to count our money. They go through our things. She pointed out her trunks and shook her hat box at us. I was so scared I pushed a scream. Darker that Darker than the night, her eyes widened to fill her bonnet. They took at things no man should see. We stirred. And would you believe they take from me my pistol? We caught our breaths. She'd been armed? Hardly more than a toy, a lady's pistol that lived in my muff. I am desolate without it. How handy a pistol can be, and mine had a pearl handle. Now we were struck dumber than before. No, we cannot brave St. Louis. She swept a tiny gloved hand at the other young woman, the silent one. I was meant to pay a visit to my aunt, Madame LeBlanc. Again, the young lady's gaze swept us. Madame Blanche LeBlanc, is she known to you? We only gaped silently back, our tongues tied. Was this young lady an actress? I, for one, wondered. I'd heard about the play acting on the showboats, but surely no performance to beat this one. We cannot go on. It is as if we are naufraged. How do you say it? Shipwrecked. We stay here. Is there a hotel? Transfixed though we were, we'd been watching the young woman behind her too, the darker one. She must be a servant. Was she a slave? A question murmured among us. Was she a slave standing now on free soil of Illinois? My, how we wondered. You don't care much for the hotel. You won't care much for the hotel, old Aunt Madge Blesdo called out. Leave it to old Aunt Madge, and she wasn't wrong. We had what we called a hotel for the salesmen and agents coming off the boats. It was even grandly named the St. James, but it was only 4 rooms over a saloon that sold shine and red eye. And it was said that the bedroom walls hadn't reached all the way to the ceiling. No, it wouldn't do for you, someone else said. I looked around and it was Mama with Cass in hand. You could have knocked me over with a feather. Mama rarely spoke out. Ewans can come stay with me. It's plain, but they's room. The young lady considered. I can pay, she said. Mama nodded while our world listened. Me, I'm Delphine Duval, the young lady said to Mama, and here is Kalinda. She gestured at the figure behind her in her shadow. I'm Mrs. Pruitt, Mama said. Enchant, madame. And Delphine Duval, she put out her small hand and Mama took it. I'm Tilly Pruitt, I said, speaking right up. This here's my sister Cass. I had to speak for Cass. She wouldn't say boo to a goose unless it had come back from the dead. Delphine Duval dropped a small curtsy my way, and I felt her eyes take me on. I looked past her to the other girl, to Kalinda. Tilly Pruitt, I said to her, putting out my hand, but hers were full and she didn't nod. I could see her shadowed eyes. Noah was there by now, very red in the face, no doubt from hauling the freight. That there's my twin brother Noah, I explained, because in the presence of Delphine Duval, he was all eyes and no tongue. But he hefted her trunk back onto his shoulder. Cass and I managed the other trunk between us, and the boat began to move away, churning water behind us. The crowd parted and off we went. Kalinda was hung all over with parcels and valises. Delphine was only lightly burdened by her hat box. Mama led the way because it was dark as snakes' insides now. I watched the shape of Delphine swaying, sighing hoop skirts, and saw that her slippers had heels. As we climbed the devil's backbone heading for home, I couldn't see a moment ahead.